Hey, this is the follow-up video that I said that I was going to be doing in regards to my journey from a cult of fundamentalist Christianity to being a nihilistic atheist now. And uh, I made the transition over about the course of 6 or 7 years. I'm currently 30, and as I mentioned a little in my first video, I was indoctrinated for 20 years in a fundamentalist Christian school. My whole family is extremely religious. Basically, every connection I had in the first part of my life was very conservative and very religious. And from a pocket of the United States, it's very religious and conservative too. So I have struck out quite a ways from that now. And really, there was kind of two sides to my journey from it. There's a personal side and there's an intellectual side. Um, on the intellectual side of things, and in terms of my rational and logical development away from it, I secularized pretty rapidly once I got to college. I went to a large secular university and majored in finance and accounting. And while that didn't directly relate to religion and it didn't immediately make me an atheist, it didn't take long before I started to realize that most of the things from the background that I was from were not. Well, let me put it this way. I realized, for one, that college was not going to be a God's Not Dead movie, that I wasn't going to get there and just instantly be pinned down by a bunch of atheist professors who would haze me and then force me to become an atheist. So then that plus um, beginning to realize some things, like when I took a class on gender relations in college, a couple of classes on gender relations, I began to realize that I personally and just logically, I thought, the idea of non-traditional gender roles began to make more and more sense to me, because I began to realize that the idea of just instantly getting married and the traditional model of the male breadwinner, female housekeeper, or house homemaker, I guess, just wasn't making any sense, because most of the girls I knew were going to college as well for the same disciplines, and it just, all of the things about the model I had been brought up with weren't making any more sense to me. So, um, additionally, after that, then I started reading Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins. I started watching debates, such as the debate on um, the Ken Ham Bill Nye debate on creationism versus evolution. And really, the big breaking point for me came when I realized that the intelligent design argument was mostly invalid, because it basically at most proves a form of deism, which is just the belief that there could be a God, not the definite belief that there is a God who has a will and commandment for you, instead of commandments and ideas and laws for you, which is totally different, of course. And it doesn't even really prove deism; it just suggests it, saying that there's many different possibilities. And the reason I realized this was from all my years of creationist indoctrination. I've never heard anyone try to actually make the case that intelligent design can specifically justify the creation of the existence of a Christian God, only that it justifies the existence of possibly some intelligent designer that doesn't even have to be a god. So once I realized that really was, and that it's the same thing also used by Muslims, Jews, and basically any religion. In fact, even if you go back to ancient Greece, that's what they used to prove the existence of Zeus. When they were arguing against Plato and Aristotle, I believe it was, or maybe it was just one of those two. But point is then after I also started reading Nietzsche and getting a broader understanding of nihilism, which I began to realize once I started reading it had already been infecting my thinking long before I became a full atheist, just in how I was beginning to reconsider all of the moral absolutes and absolutes like the Bible. That's when I realized that basically everything of my former life and former teaching was deeply, deeply flawed, and I became a full atheist. The personal side really started to fall after that, though, because I didn't, for the first 6 months when I became an atheist, I had to keep it quiet to myself, because I was surrounded by a bunch of people that would not have been understanding about it, and my life was just kind of in the shitter. So I just kind of had to be quiet about it for really about a year. But then after about a year, I sent some emails out to some people and explained to like friends and family members, just key people I thought they needed to know. And I thought it was over. Then a couple of years after that, I found out it very much was not over. One person had gotten a hold of the emails I had sent to a number of the other people, had deleted them, and had told me it was that I was not allowed to tell anyone that I was an atheist, and that tried to use a guilt trip, trying to say that it was going to just hurt a bunch of people, and that it was going to, oh, and by the way, too, that it was just so embarrassing. As you can imagine, this person was a family member, but it was pretty outrageous, and I had to fight pretty hard with that person. And then I ended up having to have a big spat with a bunch of other family members. Like, I went to an elderly relative's funeral about a year ago, and one of my relatives bribed the pastor into calling me out in the middle of the sermon. Like, it wasn't anything much, and you could tell he was really embarrassed to do it. Like, he did it like almost like in a cough. He said my name when he was referencing people who were heathens that were living in wicked, fallen ways. That's not quite the way he phrased it, but it was something kind of like that. And it was just incredibly stupid. I don't know how they thought it would actually influence me. But whatever the case is, that was one instance. And so I finally decided just to be done with it after, months of fighting with a bunch of friends and family. And so I just put up a big public post on Facebook and then deleted my Facebook account. And a bunch of people from my past, took swipes at me, and some severed ties, some some were understanding about it too. Some moderate Christians, and one family member, only one on both sides of my family, actually said something in support of me. But most of them, just took some kind of passive aggressive swipe at me in some way, shape, or form. But there was one positive light in all that. My former Bible teacher, who is a hardcore fundamentalist, he did reach out, and we had several good conversations via email about our differences on both why we're, both for rational reasons and personal reasons, either an atheist or a fundamentalist. And keep in mind, this guy was about as hardcore of a fundamentalist as existed. He did interpret the Bible literally, about as closely as anyone I've ever known. So it does show that even atheists and nihilists can have some common ground and peace with some people that are even total ideological opposites, but most of the time it's not going to be that congenial. But anyways, that's kind of a short summary of my journey from being a fundamentalist Christian and what was essentially a cult to becoming a nihilistic atheist. I currently I live a long, long ways off from the city that I originally grew up in, and that's mostly on purpose because I need to stay away from a lot of people from my past, some of whom just berate and attack me any chance they get, so I kind of have to keep my distance. But it kind of changed my life in many ways because I had my life somewhat intermerged with some friends and family from my past before I became an atheist, and was, I guess you could say, maybe had a little bit easier life. But since I've become an atheist, I've had to do everything to be much more autonomous and independent in my life because I just don't have nearly the network I used to fall back on. And it is, quite a change, as well as psychologically as well. Trying to live your whole life according to moral absolutes that you think govern the world, and then changing to the other side of the spectrum, that represents a very large psychological twist, and it's something I still struggle to adapt to every day. But I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here quickly. But that was kind of my journey from those two worlds, and I was just curious if anyone else had a similar experience that came from Christian, Muslim, or any religious background, became more secular or atheistic, or maybe if you did have the reverse journey, going from being an atheist to being a Christian. And just FYI, though, if you say that you went from being an atheist to being a Christian, I would like to hear a good case of how you actually were an atheist before you became a Christian. Because I can't tell you how many people I've heard that say, like, oh, I was an atheist. And it's like, oh, why? Because I don't know. I just didn't go to church very often. I guess that made me one. Well, no, I mean, if you actually read atheist literature and believed atheist statements, and then you actually became a very religious person, I'd like to hear that too. So go ahead and comment, like, share, subscribe, and I'll probably see you guys again soon when I do my next video on the Joker and nihilism, which should be interesting. Bye.